I would like to ask Patty McGowan to introduce our visiting Rotarians and guests.
Thanks, Brian. And I would like to introduce our visitors. And I wonder if you would stand as I call your name so we can recognize you. Daphne Massey and Pat Crofton. Welcome back. And Alan Marcus.
Steve Wallace to introduce our speaker today. Thank you.
Thank you, President Brian. Prior to the introduction, I'll announce that our next week's speaker will be the owner of Frontrunners, Rob Reed. But this week, we have with us Karen and Neil Powell, and they're from South Africa. And Karen has written a book, The Dark Side of the Rainbow, and they are fourth-generation South Africans and lived in the country themselves for 40 years. They now live in Brentwood Bay, which is like moving to paradise. They're happy British Columbians, and we're very pleased to have you, Karen and Neil, today.
It's always a pleasure for Neil and I to talk about South Africa and to raise awareness of what's happening in the country today. When we got married, we went farming, and a highway cut its way through our property, and after that we built a 150 chalet exclusive holiday resort on the lakefront of our property. We then moved to Canada because of the crime and wanted to make a better life for our children, and have been here for 20 years. We continued in construction, however, in a much smaller manner than in South Africa, and I recently wrote The Dark Side of the Rainbow. Many people have asked about the novel and if it's based on true stories, and it is. It's fiction, but it is based on our lives and those of our labourers.
Growing up under apartheid was, for me, and possibly Karen, was no different. We never saw anything that was strange. We were used to it. We were used to having separate amenities, separate youth clubs, separate beaches, separate buses. Public toilets were separate. It was a norm. We didn't know any better. A lot of people get confused. African, Afrikaner, what is the... So the African is the black African, and they're made up of 10 different tribes. The Zulu being the largest, and the Xhosa, the smaller tribe, is what is Nelson Mandela's tribe. And then you get the Dutch descendants, they are the Boer. And then you get, like Karen and I were English descendants, and we were the English, and there was a lot of hatred. I must tell you, it was not easy being English in an Afrikaans area.
Things were happy, and they were peaceful on the farm until the uprising began. We noticed things changed when we saw the two African city men visiting our preacher when his sons disappeared, and his meetings became political. There were bombs in the malls, bombs in government buildings. There were shootings. My brother was held up, carjacked, and our neighbors were murdered. It was a very, very frightening time. In fact, we put up a razor barb fence, massive big fence with razor barb on top. We put in security lights. Neil got 2 vicious guard dogs and trained them. He bought an arsenal of weapons and taught me to shoot. And blacks and whites celebrated Nelson Mandela's release and the first free elections. After the elections, there was a strange calm, like the center of a hurricane. And it was sure not to last, because Nelson Mandela was already old. Thabo Mbeki took over. He had already been running the country, or should I say involved in running the country, and he continued Nelson Mandela's legacy of supplying water and electricity to all the informal settlements. He also was involved in supplying 17 million people with social welfare grants.
Thabo Mbeki was also well known for procuring the 2010 World Cup soccer, which is now under a shroud of controversy, as we all know. But South Africa went all out for this world event.
But the negatives during Mbeki's reign outweighed the positives. As an intellectual, he lacked Nelson Mandela's charisma. Not only was there a lack of planning and development, Mbeki was also in a hurry to replace whites in municipal and government jobs, resulting in a loss of critical skills and knowledge.
The country is suffering from massive, massive power outages. They haven't built new power stations in over 20 years. And the recent loss has been estimated at $44.4 billion since 2008.
The present President Zuma, also known as JZ. Jacob Zuma was brought in. He had no formal education, but he had the support of the trade unions and the Zulus. He lasted 8 years as deputy president, was then fired on corruption scandal involving a $5 billion arms deal and accused of accepting a bribe. Unfortunately, in spite of the scandals and with the support of the unions and the unskilled bulk of the population, Zuma became president. Sorry, that's the spending graph, Zuma's spending graph compared to the other presidents, the prior presidents. After almost 2 decades of freedom, South Africa's democracy is still a work in progress, and the divide is now economic. Inequality has grown since apartheid, and gap between the rich and the poor is now amongst the world's largest.
These are going to whet your appetite for all of you who perhaps haven't ever had the privilege to visit this incredible country. That's a resort with 2 18-hole golf courses and Pilanesberg Game Reserve. The waterfront, Cape Town. Wine regions, just unbelievable. And the Big Five, the home to the Big Five, the game reserves, the wildlife is just phenomenal.
Neil's favorite photograph. Unfortunately, rubbish piles up in the streets. Sewage plants aren't maintained, and sewage is released untreated into the rivers. Water purification plants have broken down, and our daughter has to buy bottled water for cooking and drinking.
The municipality is called a monkey-pality. They make poor decisions. Instead of replacing the old pump, they have it repaired. Somebody's got to go and fabricate the impeller to fix the old pump. But there's no shortage of money for the cars, which Karen and I should have actually taken a photograph to show you. The car of choice is Range Rover, Jaguar, BMW, and Audi, and the parking lot at the municipality is full of them.
The struggle continues, and discontent was evident in Nelson Mandela's memorial service.
And the more people that know the truths about this incredible nation, hopefully world pressure can bring about change to the current government.
So we're happy to hear your insights and sad at the way things seem to be going.
It was very, very informative, and hopefully we'll have a few minutes for questions. We have a couple of announcements today. I'd ask Linnell to come forward, please.
What we're trying to do in the major events and fundraising committee is to get your opinion on what you'll support as far as fundraisers or socials. So the survey couldn't ask you the questions that are on this little piece of paper. If we could just get 3 ideas from everybody about what you'd like to see coming up in the next year, we'd be really happy to review all of them and try and work together to create something that works for the majority of people.
If I could ask Patricia to come forward next.
I've just heard yesterday that the 2 people who were planning to come with us and help with Read for the Top are not able to come. So we're putting out an appeal. If anybody has a 6-week window and feel that they could come and see the work in Kenya and also help with Read for the Top, please speak to me or spread the word to others that you know.
And Jillian, if you'd like to make your announcement, please.
Last Sunday, we had a very tearful goodbye to Manon. We shipped her back to Belgium, and it was hard. She was a lot of fun. So our incoming student sent me an email asking if she could arrive here on the 21st of August, and I said yes, as long as she's got her US and Canadian visas in hand. But I don't have anywhere for her to stay. I'm looking for host family. And the one thing I know about Giovanna is she's very into CrossFit. And I know everyone in this room knows all about CrossFit, right?
We have a birthday this week, and it's our own Alan Neal. Mark Flynn, if I may ask you to come forward, please, as the Director of Recognition.
So while I'm up here, we have happy dollars?
Speak.
God save